Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here with me today. It's me, Mrs. Miller, and today I will be reading you Ruby and the Itsy Bitsy Icky Bug by Allison Wortche. Now, I love this book not only for the message that it conveys, but I also love the way that the author and the illustrator tell this story. So while we're reading, I want you to be on the lookout for anything interesting that you notice in the way that this story is told. At the end of this book, we'll be talking about this book's message as well as talking about the author's craft within this book. I hope you enjoy it. I woke up in a great mood. It was Saturday. It was sunny. A perfectly perfect morning. Until I opened my curtains and saw this guy. A gross, yucky, icky bug on my window. I called Mommy. She was drying her hair. All she said was, "Is it inside or outside?" Would I be this calm if it was inside? I called Daddy. He was changing Ivy's diaper. All he said was, "How big is it?" I might have exaggerated a little. It didn't work. He just started singing, "The itsy bitsy bug climbed up to Ruby's room." I am an animal lover. Chipmunks, bunnies, hedgehogs, of course. I don't mind the snake pages in my animal books. I've always wished to meet a dinosaur. And I know lots of facts about ocean creatures, especially jellyfish and anglerfish. Bioluminescence equals so cool. But bugs are gross. Mommy said, maybe I should study this one like a scientist. I am planning to be a scientist and also a rock star. You can be more than one thing. But I'm going to be a marine biologist or a paleontologist, not an entomologist. I wanted that bug gone. So I sprayed water at him. I launched pretzels at my window screen. I took huge breaths and tried to blow him off. He was actually pretty strong. Then I started screaming as loud as I could to scare him away. He stayed put. I got a timeout. A timeout in my room with Mr. Yuck Bug? Fine. I took a closer look. I figured he was a beetle. 2 sets of gross beetly wings, 6 gross, pretty strong legs, 2 gross antennae. Well, his antennae weren't too gross. They were kind of cute, moving around like that. I decided to draw him. I had plenty of time left in my timeout. I heard my parents laughing with Ivy downstairs. I felt a little lonely. So I told Mr. Yuckbug some things about bioluminescent fish. I showed him my newest self-portrait, and I introduced him to my stuffed animals. Then I drew him again, with even more detail. He crawled around like he was happy to be on my window. It seemed like he was studying me, too. I was feeling a little bad for spraying, blowing, and scaring him, and not just because of the time out. Finally, Daddy came to get me, but I kept going back upstairs to check on my bug all day. He stuck around. Okay, I was wrong. He wasn't gross. He was strong. He had kind of cute antennae. He was a good listener. It wasn't until I put on my pajamas and jumped into bed that I realized he was also bioluminescent. Incredible! I waved as my firefly floated into the night, making his own light, blinking goodbye. I might be a marine biologist, a paleontologist, a rock star, and an entomologist. We'll see. So Ruby seemed to learn a lesson in this book. What lesson did Ruby learn? Could you please whisper into your hands what she learned in this book? Ready, set, share. 1, 2, 3, eyes on me. So I was saying that I thought Ruby learned that bugs aren't so icky after all. Right at the beginning of this book, she thought that bugs were really icky, but as she started to study this bug on her window, she learned that actually she liked this bug. And now I'm wondering, what life lesson could this book teach us? What does it teach us as readers? Let's stop and think about that. When you have an idea, would you please touch your head so that I know that your idea is ready? Have you ever thought that you didn't like something, but then you gave it a chance and you found out that you actually did like it? It might be something like bugs. Like when I was a little girl, I remember I was afraid of spiders. And then one day, my neighbor Joe, he said, "Hey, Cindy, come check out this spider web. It's so cool." And I was like, "Ew, I don't like spiders, gross." But he's like, "No, you gotta look at this." And he showed me this miraculous spider. This thing was so intricate. And I looked at it and I thought like, wow, this is pretty amazing. And then I found myself watching the spider create this spider web. And it changed the way that I felt about spiders. But it might not even be something like that. Like it might be something like you thought you didn't like peas. And then you gave them a chance and you decided that you liked them. So to me, this book teaches me to keep an open mind. Don't assume that you don't like something without giving it a chance. Now, I'd like to also talk to you about the amazing things that this author and illustrator do to make this story really come to life. So let's take a look back. So one thing that I noticed that the author does throughout this book is she uses something called ellipses. That's these 3 little dots throughout this book. For instance, let's see right here, she uses the ellipses. When you use ellipses, it's almost like you're going dun dun dun. So it keeps the reader in suspense. So here it says, until I opened my curtains and saw, and then there are these ellipses here, dun dun dun. This guy. And notice how this guy is written in really big red letters. Doesn't that make it pop out? So that's something else that this writer does throughout this book. She uses pop-out words to draw your attention and emphasize certain words. You know, something really cool about reading other people's books is you can get ideas for your own writing. So these are things that maybe you could try in your own writing. You could use ellipses to create suspense. You could use pop-out words to grab your reader's attention too. Now, something else that this author does a really great job at is telling this story bit by bit. So, for example, on this page, when Ruby is trying to get rid of the bug, she doesn't just say, Ruby swatted at the bug to try to get rid of it. No. She has Ruby spray water at him. And then it says, I launched pretzels at my window screen. Then it says, I took huge breaths and tried to blow him off. And then, this is what gets her in trouble, right? Then I started screaming as loud as I could to scare him away. So the author has her do not one, but 4 different things to try to get rid of this bug. And it's those details that really make this story come to life. The last thing that I want to talk to you about that I love that this author does is she finds an interesting way to end her story. So, do you remember this part of the story where she says, I am planning to be a scientist, but I'm going to be a marine biologist or a paleontologist, not an entomologist. Well, what do you notice that Ruby says at the very end of the book? Yes, she circles back to earlier in the book, and now she says, I might be a marine biologist, a paleontologist, a rock star, and an entomologist. We'll see. So I just thought that that was sort of a neat way that the author tied up her ending and referred back to something earlier in the book. So that's something that you could try too when you're writing your own stories. You could leave like a little breadcrumb earlier in your book for later in the book when you want to wrap it up. You can refer back to that part. Isn't that a fun way for her to end this story? I thought so. So I hope that you really enjoyed this book, and I hope that it also gave you some ideas for things that you could try out in your own books when you think about your own author's craft. Because when we read books, we read them for the message of the book, we read them to enjoy them, but we also can read them through the lens of a writer and get our own ideas for our own books. Thank you again for joining me today, and if you enjoyed this read aloud, please like and subscribe so that you can hear more. Bye-bye.